Okay, so today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. So in addition to obviously doing film reviews in the past, I'm also like a big basketball historian. Not that I really even watch full games anymore, or I never really even used to watch like entire things, but I would always love the lore and the drama, and I just know like a lot of facts and information about it, especially with the old school stuff. Like I would debate all kind of fallacies, like Wilt Chamberlain, people try to discredit. So like that's one of my most infamous or famous takes from it, right? Way back in the day, like maybe 10 years ago or something. It was like, and this was my problem back then, is that I wouldn't really post videos. I would just do stuff only live. So if I had made a clip, it might have went viral or something. But the thing I would keep bringing up is the fact that people try to discredit the era rather than the individual, just because they can't discredit the individual, right? Wilt Chamberlain's numbers are so god level that you can't say anything. All you have to do is say, oh, well, the competition was weak or this or that. But the reason why that doesn't work is because everyone else was playing against that same competition too. He wasn't the only one who had a height advantage. You know, there are other players, but it doesn't mean that, oh, you automatically average 50. Or even in the modern era, like, okay, George Mirasan had a bigger height advantage on the league at this time than, you know, when he played than Wilt had when he played. Or like Yao Ming had a big height advantage. That doesn't mean you automatically put up those kind of numbers. So you're kind of shortchanging the whole thing to say, there are obviously other skills and abilities and athletic capabilities that he had that other people just simply didn't. He's way more skilled than people give him credit for. So that's the fallacy that, again, you attack the era, but it doesn't even make sense because you're saying, well, you know, if we could go in a time machine and bring Wilt to the future, how good would he be now? Now, quite frankly, he'd probably be really damn good anyway, right? But it's not fair because you benefit from all the modern technology. We talk about the same thing whenever I discuss chess, too. You have the modern benefits of greater nutrition and foods and money that you make from your career, better sneakers, better resources, options, better medical staff, better everything across the board, right, for you, training regimens and facilities. Everything across the board is better and you're more advantaged that way, but yet you would say in some other sense that, okay, somehow we're going to take somebody who didn't have all those advantages, right, that we have in the modern day and compare them to somebody who did have them. So what if you put Wilt in the modern era, but you have him actually grow up in the modern era and have him actually benefit from those things on top of his natural abilities? Then what happens? Oh, now he's even better than he was, or vice versa. Okay, take LeBron or somebody, right, and put him back in the past without all these advantages, like, again, just of the modern day. Not saying that he grew up rich or something. Obviously, he was poor, but what I'm saying is, just the era itself comes with certain advantages, right? Food is more nutritious on average. We have better awareness of health and medicine and you know, good habits and again, just better facilities. Even, again, it's not like any of these people are necessarily rich growing up. So it's like, you know, you had to work harder then to do the same thing, or you had less resources, less knowledge of the game, less knowledge of you know, the human body. So you're kind of separating it in both senses. So put Wilt Chamberlain in the modern day with the modern advantages and he'd be even better. Put these modern players in the old eras without these advantages and then they'd be worse. And I love that line by J.J. Redick that just sums up the fallacy so easily, but he's actually practicing the fallacy, but it exposes it without him realizing, like, oh, they were all plumbers and firefighters. Okay, so who were they supposed to be then? What do you mean? Oh, they're just born and they come out of the womb and they're already an athlete. Like, everybody obviously does something else. Why did they have to be plumbers and firefighters? Oh, because you didn't make that much money from being an athlete then. And so, you know, plumbers and firefighters might be in good shape compared to the average person. Like what do you want these people to be? So what was LeBron then? Was he a plumber or firefighter? No, he was a high school kid. Oh, so you're going against high school kids now. Like, what kind of criteria is that? Now, yes, they're world-class athletes, but you know what I mean? That's what you become. So the best plumbers and firefighters became world-class athletes of the time. And then you can only judge somebody against their peers. That's how greatness is measured. So 100 years from now, we might look back at LeBron and say, oh, he'd be a bum today because we're using like cybernetic fucking whatever, modified biology, whatever. Like we'll somehow modify our bodies using whatever, certain things that would make us more athletic, even if we're not naturally like that, or what. That's kind of what, in some form, nutritions and all these kind of modern advantages do. But that's the whole stupidity of it, is like, the best athletes in the world at the time, who played those sports at the time, right, go against the other best. So they're still world-class athletes. You can say whatever you want, like, you know, like, really, what's the understanding? Within 100 years, or less than 100 years, it's basically like, it's basically a case where you're able to say that, oh, human beings have evolved and advanced so much in the last, not even 100 years, but like 80 to 90, 100 years, right? What does that mean? Like, why would they just magically have advanced that much? That's not how it works. It's more so our technology that we benefited from, some of the foods and things that we do differently, habits like that have changed, right? The innate human being on average is not that much more, athletic or anything different now than they were 100 years ago. Arguably, you might be less so because people are more sedentary and they're sitting at their computers more and things like that, whereas 100 years ago, manual labor was more of a common thing. So I don't really understand what any of that is about, right? Like, and again, basketball at least is a kind of a skill game more so than raw athleticism. Like, you see players who don't look like they're the most athletic, like Luka Doncic or Larry Bird, right? They have skills. Even Steph Curry, like he's not John Stockton. These are not like the most physically, athletically imposing people, but they're skilled, they're smart, they have a certain instinct, they have certain, specialties. So just because you can do that does not mean that, all of a sudden it's all about the athletic ability, right? You can point to somebody like Shaq as an example of that, sort of the means argument that I always do. But anyway, that's just rehashing one of my old-time takes. But what I'll do in this sort of session is just a random one, because this is like my secondary slot where I've just been doing sort of random things. I've opened it up completely. I did a couple episodes of Shark Tank. I did a couple episodes of like, what would you do? I am just willing to basically do whatever I want. I watched like a Jesse Lee Peterson debate last time. But what I'll do here is I'll give my sort of current takes as it's going on with the NBA season or whatever. So now the playoffs are going on. Today is May the 26th. And so we have Boston's up 3-0 on the injured Indiana Pacers. And then you have Mavericks up 2-0 on the Timberwolves. So let me recap like what I was saying before the playoffs started, because I always like to do these kind of predictions, and it's kind of good to do it this way. So I should upload it just so people could look back and say, wow, what a good prediction that was. Because I do have somewhat a pretty good record generally, although I've been screwed over by the Clippers because the last several years I've said that they're going to win the championship, but they're not healthy. So it's kind of unfair, right? Whenever people make predictions, you have to at least take that into account. It's assuming you're going to be healthy, because think about it now. Okay, people pick the Boston Celtics. So now Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both get injured and they lose. But then people say, oh, what a bad prediction. Wow, how could you be that stupid to think they were going to win? Even though it was expecting that they'd be healthy. So that's unfair. Kawhi was healthy most of the season, right? The regular season. It looked like he was going to be able to play in the playoffs, and then he just can't, or he does briefly and then he loses, and they still take them 6 games, right? The Mavs, who were still pretty hot, and they weren't just like a second round out team, right? So they took them 6 games still and blew them out once in the game 1, right? So it almost seemed like they might win the series. The point is, even without Kawhi, the point is that's how good the Clippers were even without him. So, of course, that's going to make the difference. He would have won that series. Kawhi's beaten the Mavs like twice, right, during his time with the Clippers. They've had a couple epic series, but the point is that, yeah, you can't discount injuries. So, like, my finals matchup was the Clippers versus the Bucks. Now it's like, oh, what a stupid prediction. Look how wrong I am. I'm a regular Stephen A. Smith, but, I mean, he's just been wrong overall. Like, he got 10 years of the finals winners wrong or something like that, right? But the point is, okay, the Clippers didn't make it only because their major best player got injured in Kawhi, and then the Bucks also lost Giannis, and then I wasn't even paying attention, but I think they also lost Damian Lillard at some point. It was basically just a complete mess where it's not really the fault of the prediction. Obviously, I'm assuming those players are healthy. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be perfectly healthy. They could miss a game. They could be a little banged up, like everybody gets banged up. But you at least have to be able to play. So that's how stupid that is. But people would still be like that. Oh, people really thought the Bucks were going to go somewhere. It's Doc Rivers' fault. Also, injuries. Or you know what I saw that's really dumb? Is people blaming Tom Thibodeau for, players getting injured because of the Derrick Rose thing back in the day. Like, all the Knicks got injured. But you know what I mean? Like, if you can't really blame that, because if he didn't play them as much as he did, then maybe you wouldn't be in that position. You would have lost in an earlier round, right? Or you would have lost sooner. So, yeah, you'd be healthy, but you'd be on the bench. So what good is that? So I don't really hold that against him too much. Injuries are very hard to judge. But no, Kawhi's one of my highest rated players that I always, respect so much, that I think he's been really mistreated, because he's done more than a lot of other players who are celebrated every day, and yet, the only reason why he isn't considered greater is because of injuries, right? So we always ignore him and brush him to the side. Like, if he had just been healthy several seasons, like with the Clippers or whatever, in general, there's nothing negative to really say about them. They missed the one chance when they were up 3-1 against Denver in the bubble. This is one of my other good takes. Like, they're up 3-1 against Denver, and I had picked the Clippers there, and they should have won there. See, like, there I have no excuse. I was just wrong. It was a bad prediction. I'm not going to use the bubble as an excuse because the bubble, everybody played in the bubble, so you can't discredit it that way, right? So if they had won, does that mean, oh, now it's discredited because of the bubble too? Or if anybody else had won, it would have been equally discredited, as people try to do with the Lakers. But the point is that, I'm not going to take into account injuries unless you know it going in. I'm not even going to take into account injury history because it's like, just because this guy has been injured historically, it appears they're going to be healthy this time. I'm expecting them to be healthy this time. It's not really fair to keep doing that, right? So I've been wrong about that a number of times. But again, at least in the bubble, I was objectively wrong. Like, that was just a bad prediction. They were up 3-1, they should have won, and they just didn't. So that's their fault, right? And so I'm wrong. Instead of, oh, they got injured. That was the only time, think about it. The bubble was the only time, 2020, that the Clippers were ever healthy with this whole run. And they were up 3-1 on Denver, and they should have at least, they would have had a good series against the Lakers. Maybe you believe they would have lost that too. But, that at least I could accept. But it makes no sense. Like, they were in good form, and then suddenly they just choke, and who knows what happens. Doc Rivers has the curse. So yeah, I disagree with the Tom Thibodeau slander. What was the other take? Like, just everybody else is, everybody sort of glazing up. Well, I guess first of all in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark. So it creates this reverse feedback loop, like Anthony Edwards too. They're getting all this hype, like comparing him to Jordan and all this kind of crazy thing. Like, Anthony Edwards is a good player, he's a fine player, but Karl Anthony Towns is the real MVP of that team and that franchise. He was there toiling in obscurity for 9 years. He was there, struggling and helping build up that franchise. You would not get to this point without him, right? Yes, Anthony Edwards in the present moment is this nice, flashy player, and he's good, and he's better in the, at least on a game-to-game basis, he's better than Karl Anthony Towns. But you have to show some respect to somebody like, they helped build that culture, that franchise up. And I know people say, well, what? They weren't winning anything, but you don't go from not winning anything to now you're going to be potentially in the NBA Finals or at least in the conference finals. How does that happen? Oh, Anthony Edwards just comes along. No, that's not how it works, right? Even if you don't appreciate it, right? Cat was helping to build up to where you could get catapulted to this point. So, you don't get to just come in as Anthony Edwards and take all the credit. So I think Cat has been disrespected. And also, I don't like his nickname. Like, they call him Ant-Man. Like, so anybody whose name is Anthony, like Carmelo Anthony could have been Ant as well, right? It just, Anthony is a common first name and last name. But no, it's kind of like, I don't know, obviously you had Melo for Carmelo. I'm just saying, like, that's not a very good nickname, just what, Ant-Man. But no, they're hyping him up way too much, so now it creates this reverse feedback. Like, I like the guy, I respect the guy, but they hyped him up way too much so far, and now he's had a couple bad games, so now they'll jump off the bandwagon. People are always, triggered and recency bias and all this kind of stuff. So I was kind of pushing back against that a little bit, like, just don't hype this guy up too much because he's good. He's a good young player. It is kind of a surprise they beat Denver. So let me see what my predictions overall actually were. Going into the playoffs, I had said, okay, the Clippers would win the whole championship, obviously win the West, assuming, again, Kawhi is healthy, which I still would stand by because, again, they got to Game 6 even without him, and that makes, obviously, a huge difference. And that against, again, not just like it's not like, oh, they're the 1 seed and they got to Game 6 against the 8 seed and lost without Kawhi. They were actually, fighting 4 and 5, and the Mavs have shown themselves to be even a lot better than I would have expected. And so, yeah, that series definitely surprised me, or didn't surprise me, because obviously Kawhi didn't play, or he played briefly, but not only was he not himself, but then it wasn't even like something that lasted. Like he played and then they took him out again, right, for the rest of the series towards the end. So, right, that doesn't really count. And so the one thing that you can consider easily is the fact that, okay, what other predictions did I make? So my second team in the West was, the East I had picked the Bucks, right? So my two predictions had gotten derailed. To win the East, obviously Giannis being healthy, Dame, just the sheer amount of talent, even though during the regular season. And of course, I've been very critical of the Boston Celtics, where, they lose to an 8 seed last year. They've been constantly choking it, even though Jaylen Brown and Devin Booker are two of my favorite players, right? Their teams haven't had that much success here, although to be fair, Booker at least took a worse team to the finals than Brown did, so I'll give him a certain amount of credit there. But no, those are arguably my two favorite players, but it's a simple case where you're able to actually, they've still been disappointing in a way, and of course I always say, like, if Boston wins the title, it's going to be Jaylen Brown who's the best player, so at least that's aged pretty well. And then you also have a secondary situation where, just Boston has choked in a lot of situations that I consider to be quite strange. So I don't believe in them even still. Even now, yes, they're going to win the East, but I still think they'll lose the final. But no, I would have predicted that the Bucks would have beaten the Celtics in like 6 games, right, to get to the finals. But because of injury, that didn't happen. Then I would have predicted the Clippers would have beaten the Bucks in like 7 games in the finals to win it all. And then, so all that got derailed. So let's just look at what actually happened. So the Mavs obviously beat OKC. I would not have predicted that, I will admit. I would have thought OKC would have won in like 7, so I'm surprised by that. Because, see, you have this tandem that's very scary in Luka and Kyrie. They're both like 2 of the most frustrating players to play against because, you can play good defense, but they'll still make all these crazy shots, obviously. And so Kyrie's obviously been through a lot with the whole, flat earth controversy and all these kind of stupid things that people focus on, not wanting to get a vaccine and stuff, but none of that really has to do with anything. He's obviously very skilled. So that's a very scary matchup to go on. In fact, it almost reminds you of the 2016 Cavs, like where they're not the most talented team or they're not better than the Warriors, but those 2 guys can just have crazy nights, Kyrie and LeBron. So in this case, it's Kyrie and Luka, who obviously Luka can't play defense like LeBron, and he doesn't play exactly the same style, but they can just dominate the game in so many ways and kind of control the pace of the game, like where, they're just making every pass and getting every rebound, and they can just take over for a certain period of time where it's not about how good you are at that point, right, as a team. It's just like, wow, this one guy is just too good. So I didn't pick them to win that, right? So let's think about, like, the second round. I had picked Denver to beat Minnesota in 7 games, and even though the trajectory of the series didn't go how I thought it would, like they lost the first 2 and then won the next 3, Denver, I'm surprised that, they actually lost. I almost can't believe it. Again, you can glaze up Anthony Edwards all you want, but we kind of know that going in. He's good. Obviously, Cat's good, but just something about that surprised me. Rudy Gobert is a bit of an overrated clown who's still getting too much credit. He makes that one fadeaway jumper. But no, the point is I would have predicted Denver in 7 there. So I guess Denver would have been my fallback after the other 2 predictions are ruined by injuries. So, like, obviously the Clippers number 1, the Bucks number 2, and then I guess Denver number 3. Now, why was I so low on Denver, despite obviously I predicted them to win that series? So I guess I can take credit for that. Like, well, I told you their championship was an asterisk because even though I didn't really say that, but I played it down. Like, they had one of the easiest paths to the title, so when they face a real team like Minnesota, right, an actual tough team, now they're going to lose, not because they're not good enough, but because they're kind of gotten lazy and complacent. They had a very easy path last year because they fought a 7th seed in the conference finals, the Lakers, and then they fought an 8th seed in the finals, the Heat. Now, you might say, well, they're good enough to get there, right? Obviously, the Lakers beat the 2 seed, and the Lakers beat the Warriors, the defending champion there, to get there, and also the Heat obviously beat everybody who was in their way, whether it be Boston, who again wasn't injured, and the Bucks and everybody like that. So the point is that, yes, I give them credit for getting there, but it's not a high enough standard. In other words, normally in the finals, it's not like, oh, you're beating a team that's just good enough to get there, like an 8 seed, right, who's still, they're not an ordinary 8 seed, yes, but you're not facing one of the all-time great teams, like, wow, the Warriors with Kevin Durant, or, whatever, the Miami Heat with LeBron and the Big 3. That's what you expect to come out in the finals, right? Instead, you're getting still relatively an easier matchup and lineup, both in the conference finals and the finals. Like, you fight a 7 and 8 seed to win the title in both the second, in the last 2 rounds. And so because of that, you're in a position where, that's just not a very tough path. So I wasn't really entirely sold on them. But I guess now I'm even surprised still that they lost to Minnesota. I thought they might lose later, or more to the point, I still thought they would win because, once again, they would have had an incredibly easy path. So they should really be ashamed of themselves because, there was still no real competition. The Clippers got hurt, the Bucks got hurt. I don't believe in the Celtics. So you had like two sort of front-runner teams that benefited from injuries and weakness, or not even injuries, but just weak competition. So Denver lost last year because their competition was weak, and then the Celtics now are running through the East because all their competition is also weak. So when are they going to face actually a real team? And so that could be Minnesota or Dallas, or obviously the Nuggets already faced Minnesota, so people would have been on that bandwagon too. So no, when the Wolves were up 2-0, I still had faith in the Nuggets. Okay, I'm like, they're still good enough to come back and beat them, right? Even though I wasn't too sold on them, Minnesota's also a young team, so they had a lot to prove, so I'm surprised it went that way. So I still had predicted that the Nuggets would win, so at least I was partly right, like that they came back and won 3, but then I was shocked that they lost the last 2. Again, front runners where, well, I guess they're not front runners when they're down 0-2, but they win 3 in a row and then they got overconfident again, just like they went into the series overconfident to go down 0-2 in the first place. And then you have a position where, again, Boston has absolutely been, but both of those teams sort of ambulance chasers where they've kind of benefited from injuries, sort of, but I mean the Pacers still did well. The Bucks were injured, obviously they wouldn't have beat them then. The Knicks were a little bit banged up, but they still had Brunson. I mean, they still had a good enough team, so I don't really feel bad for the Knicks. But now, obviously, the Celtics benefited from a lot with respect to, obviously, the Bucks being injured, so they didn't have to face them. And then even the Cavs, which, again, I would have expected them to beat the Cavs anyway, but Donovan was down for a couple games, right? And then Indiana, again, I'm not even complaining that, you're playing a 6 seed in the conference finals in the Pacers, but at least play them at full strength, but you can't even do that. So I'm not going to blame them for what they can't control, but what I'm warning is the same thing. They will not win the finals no matter who they face. Minnesota will beat them or the Mavs will beat them, and the reason why is because of the simple fact that, again, it's the same thing with the Nuggets. You've gotten complacent and you've gotten spoiled by facing all these teams that are not very good or not in their full strength, so you haven't really been tested yet, and you'll get tested in the finals and it'll be a wake-up call, kind of like even when they made it to the finals before against the Warriors. It's like the Warriors were on their last leg and they're kind of, they haven't done anything since then, and so it's a case where you're not able to really respect that because, yes, give them credit, it's Steph Curry and this and that, but the Warriors were on their last fumes, and so the Boston Celtics were better, they should have won, they were up 2-1, and then they just kind of mentally collapsed. So that they should have won that series, honestly, against the Warriors, even though I had picked the Warriors to win that. In fact, not only did I pick the Warriors to win that series, I picked them to win that year, when a lot of people at the beginning weren't really sure of that, so that was actually a good call. Right, so I've had predictions like that. You might think in hindsight, of course they won, and Wiggins stepped up and Poole stepped up. But at the beginning of the year, nobody had that, right? It wasn't or at least it wasn't like a consensus pick that, in fact, I had said the Warriors would win 2 more championships after Kevin Durant leaves, and of course I was wrong because they're not going to win one now. But that was one of the 2 at least, right, after the Kevin Durant era. But no, let's look at the series here that we have to deal with. I would have predicted that the Nuggets won in 7, right, against the Timberwolves, but they didn't, so I was wrong about that. And I was also wrong about the Mavs, that I thought OKC would have won in 7 too, right, just being the higher seed and everything like that. But I guess you have to give the Mavs a certain amount of credit. They do have more experience, at least, than OKC because, they have been through a lot. They've lost to the Clippers a couple times, so they got their revenge, even though it wasn't against Kawhi. Right? I'd respect you more if you beat him with Kawhi fully healthy and all that. So, I mean, again, injuries are just kind of deflating, but it's always just such imperfect timing. Or what I've seen that's kind of funny is people keep having these conspiracy videos the rim has a magnetic pull that they use to kind of script these moments, and it's scripted. The one element of the game that is scripted objectively is obviously the refereeing, and we've seen plenty of references to this. Not that they rig it outright, but they'll ignore certain calls if they want the game to go a certain way. They're obviously trying to make the series last as long as possible. there's not a perfect science. Like, teams will still get swept and things like that will happen, but the referees obviously have an incentive to favor either the home team or also to try to extend series as long as possible. So a good example of that is like in 2016, right? Like where they suspend Draymond for Game 5 when, he's cursing at somebody. That's not the sort of thing that warrants a suspension, especially in the course of a finals game. So they wouldn't normally do that. But why are they doing that? Because the Warriors are up 3-1. So they're like, oh, maybe we can get one more game out of it if we just suspend Draymond, which is correct. Now, that doesn't mean the league wanted the Cavs to win the whole series or that they expected that to happen, right? The Warriors could have still closed out in Game 5 anyway, or Game 6 or whatever, right? But it changed the momentum of the series. So it's not rigged in terms of the outcome, like, oh, the Cavs won in 7 games because of the league, but at least that one game was like, okay, the league wants to get it. Instead of closing out in Game 5, the Warriors will close out in Game 6, right? That's all they wanted. So they did rig it in that sense to suspend Draymond at a perfect time to try to give the advantage to the Cavs for the one game, but I won't say it's for the whole series. And in fact, one of my favorite teams in that context, at least, as far as rigging, would be like the Warriors, because it's like they're down 3-1 to OKC, and people might say, oh, it's rigged. But unless they have that magnetic pull on the rim, or they have like some kind of, ball on a string, since this is a team that hits so many jump shots and doesn't even draw that many fouls, right, with Klay and Steph going crazy, then the reality is that, you can't really rig it in their favor. They really just had to hit those jump shots, which they weren't hitting earlier in that series in 2016. So there is something to that where, you have to respect the fact that that kind of neutralizes rigging accusations, because it's not a team that relies on free throws. It's not a team that's scoring a lot in the paint or anything like that. So, fouls have very little to do with it. It all has to do with just, can you hit those bomb three-point jump shots or not? And so Klay is somebody who's one of my favorite players, but I've been disappointed in him the last couple of years just because, he's fallen off pretty hard. And I was wrong about one thing there. I thought his game would age very gracefully because, Ray Allen or somebody where you can still hit jump shots and you can still be clutch, but he hasn't been able to shoot like he used to, even though, again, jump shooters you would think would age gracefully, even if all you do is hit some jump shots. That's all he was doing kind of anyway. Like, he was a great defender. He would, be able to score other ways, but I'm just saying you should be able to at least maintain your ability to shoot, but for some reason he wasn't able to do that. And so, what else do we have? We have a situation in which we're able to look at the current series. So again, I'm going to continue to stay down on the Mavs, even though they're up 2-0. I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon. I predicted that the Wolves would win this series in 6 games, so now I'll append it to, okay, they'll win in 7 because they got off to such a bad start, but I still am picking the Wolves in this series. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon with Dallas the same way that people jumped on the bandwagon with Minnesota when they're up 2-0 on the Nuggets, even though, yes, they still did win. You saw how they lost 3 in a row. So I would predict that Minnesota is going to win the next 2 games, right? Then Dallas, so Minnesota wins, and again, really turning home court on its head, but Minnesota wins 2 in a row. Or no, you know what? I think they'll actually win 3 in a row. So it'll be the same thing that they did to the Nuggets. They'll win 3 in a row, they'll be up 3-2, then Dallas will squeeze out 1 more, and then they'll lose in Game 7, right? And so home court has definitely been questionable, though, for these teams, because Minnesota just lost 4 straight games at home, right? Or not in a row, but they lost 2 in Denver against Denver, and now they lost 2 against the Mavs. So clearly their home court advantage is not actually all that strong. But the fact that they were able to beat the defending champs gives them more credibility to me still. So I respect Luka and Kyrie, but they're kind of overdue to just have a bad game, right? So I'll still pick Minnesota in 7. I'm not going to be a prisoner of the moment with the 0-2. I did predict it at 6 at the beginning, right? Minnesota in 6. And then the other series is just obviously the fact that we have Boston, obviously up 3-0 on the Pacers. I said that the Celtics would win in 6. And this is kind of one of those young team things. 2 of these games were still winnable, right? Game 3, they were up big, 8 points with 2 minutes left. The Pacers, and they let it slip away, even without Tyrese Haliburton, once again questioning the Celtics. And then Game 1, you have to close that. So if they had won game 1, then I would say Celtics in 7, and it's quite possible that the Pacers could have won in 7 because it changes the whole complexion of the series. So you can't count on having that situation happen against Boston too much. So you have to win those kind of games where you're up and you have a chance, right? You have to close that because that might be the only chance you get. And so that game's going to be so important down the road, but also they get injured too, so it's not even really fair. So I'm going to predict that in the finals too, that Minnesota will beat Boston in actually just 6 games, not even 7. I think they'll win in 6. And I just think Boston's very mentally weak, and they're very, but no, like the complacency from Denver almost transferred to the Wolves. Like Denver's overly complacent because they're the champion, and they think, oh, we can just turn it on. And then Minnesota beat the champion, so now they're like, oh, we can easily beat this 5th seed Dallas Mavericks or whatever, right? Like, let's think about some of these other storylines, like Rudy Gobert being blamed for the block, right? Or for defending Luka and giving up the 3. And it's like, the real story is it's just a mismatch. So it doesn't matter, even if it was somebody less skilled than Luka, but just a guard. It could be Kyrie, it could be somebody else, right? It's a guard against the center, so of course the guard can shimmy on him and do all kind of things, get to the paint. Rudy should have just played up on him more, like, you know, deny the 3. Even if you go around me, then have somebody else to blame for letting him hit a 2 and you're up by 3. So, oh yeah, here's a Steph Curry take too from back in the day. Just, you know, as great as he is, he made 2 key bad decisions and took 2 bad shots in key moments in a finals game. Like, Game 7 against Kevin Love, he took a 3 and he's even acknowledged that. So, like, the team is tied and he keeps taking these 3-point shots, right? All you have to do is go in, try to get fouled, go in, try to make a layup, make a floater, use the 3 as a fake out because they think you're going to take a 3, so they're overplaying you. So just go around him, go do something else in the paint. So use the power and the threat of the 3, but don't always just take a 3. You're not even down at all. It's not that you're down by... So he does it there against Kevin Love, but then he does it again, even when they're down by... Or no, I mean, I guess that's the same thing, right? Then they end up down by 3 because Kyrie hits that very clutch shot. And, of course, Kyrie has this dubious statistic that's, you know, very scary to other teams. Like, don't let me get 3, Kyrie Irving, Uncle Drew. Like, if you, anytime he's in a closeout game, he always wins, which means obviously you're like up 3-2 or up whatever, about to close them out. He's never lost in that scenario in like 14 tries. But that was very, very scary for OKC, and they kept the trend true. But no, my point with Steph is that in 2016, the game is tied and you keep taking 3s instead of using the 3 as a fake-out option to try to get a floater, a 2, a pass for somebody else, something else, right? So he falls in love with that too much. Yes, he's great at it, but it's not even like hindsight. It's just you don't need a 3 in that situation. You don't have to force a bad one and try to make that happen. And he did the same thing against the Raptors. This is a high-level criticism, obviously. But he does the same thing against the Raptors where you're only down by 1, I think, right? You're down by 1 against the Raptors in Game 6 in 2019. Yes, Kevin Durant's injured, Klay Thompson's injured, but you take a 3 immediately, and it's not even a great 3-point shot, although for him, I guess any 3-point shot is great. But the point is that you take a 3 instead of, okay, you fake the 3, 2 guys are on you. He could have easily gone by them and either gotten fouled, he could have gotten a layup, a floater, he could have passed it out to somebody, gotten a 2, gotten an easy dunk or something for somebody else, because you have 2 defenders collapsing on you at the 3-point line and over it playing, so you could have easily gotten by them. And so the point is that you have a case where he made 2 bad decisions there where, again, it's a high-level point, but you definitely should not have taken a 3 there. You're only down by 1, so you could get a 2 and you're up, you could get fouled, right? You don't need a 3 at all. The only way that makes sense is if you're down by 3, or at least if you're down by 2, but you're only down by 1 in that case and you force a 3. You're only tied in 2016 against Kevin Love, and you also take a 3, right, where you don't need to do that. I get that, oh, that's what he's known for. He's a 3-point shooter, but you know, the power is sometimes in the threat, that they're so focused on that they sometimes give you easier shots inside, take a mid-range shot, take a floater, right? But no, getting back to this, again, Luka has been impressive, but I'm still going to say the Wolves win in 7. So I think they'll win 3 in a row now, then lose 1, and then win the last one. And then Boston, obviously, I think they'll lose Game 4, and then they'll win Game 5 because whatever, they're still choke artists, so they'll still find a way to lose one game, and then they'll make it to the finals, and then Minnesota will beat them in 6. Now, you might think, oh, that's me jumping on the Minnesota bandwagon. But no, I didn't predict this from the beginning. It's just like, I have to go with what I see now. So I will say that Minnesota will win out of respect for, like one prediction just gets lumped onto the next. The Clippers are wrong because they get injured. The Bucks are wrong because they get injured. Then I'm forced to go with the Nuggets despite my reservation from their championship last year. Now the team who beats the Nuggets ends up having to be the favorite. Right, so yeah, I'll still stay on that to say that I'm not convinced by the Mavs. I think they're right to have a couple bad games. They rely too much on Luka and Kyrie, so they're going to just have some off nights and whatever. Oh yeah, the Rudy Gobert thing, though, is a situation where they're blaming him, but it's not his fault. Even though I've clowned him and made fun of him, and I think he's overrated, and I think it's not the era where a player like him is going to really be that impactful, even though, again, you have to use his role sparingly. Maybe he shouldn't be in the game that often. Or no, I actually said going into the series that I thought Dallas would really struggle against Minnesota, and the reason why is because I had picked them to lose in 6, but I thought they'd really struggle because they have these big bodies pack the paint, Karl Anthony Towns, obviously, and Rudy Gobert, and even others, Naz Reid and stuff, that Joker was complaining about and struggling with a little bit, although he still had a good series. It's not really his fault. But the point is that, the Nuggets should basically be ashamed because they kind of showed complacency, right? You lose 2 in a row because you're going in overconfident, and you haven't been tested both last year and this year up till now. Then you win 3 in a row, like you flip the switch and you turn it on, but then you get overconfident again, like, oh, we're about to close them out, so we're cocky. And then, so you have these big bodies that I thought Luka and Kyrie would struggle against. Yes, they'll hit jump shots, like obviously he did there to win the game, but Luka and Kyrie will struggle scoring in the paint, right? And they don't have like a great paint scorer really at the highest level, like, they have some decent players, Gafford and stuff, but Washington. But no, you would get stifled in the paint, so now you're forced to take too many jump shots, and so I thought they would struggle in that capacity. Yes, you're going to hit some jump shots, but it's not going to be enough to win you the game. So I thought Dallas would struggle against Minnesota's defense, which they might still do. But maybe you have to take Rudy Gobert out the game and not let this be the focus. But as much as I clown him, I'm not going to blame him for that shot, except that he should have overplayed up on the 3 a bit more and not worried about trying to stop Luka from driving past him. Let him drive past you and let them pick him up. It's really a fault of the switching, right? So on one hand, I think Kenny Smith said something like this too, but I had said it first, or whatever. I had thought it first, but whatever. We kind of agree. Either Rudy Gobert should not be in the game at that point, or that switch should not occur. You should either be doubling Luka, or you should accept the fact that don't let that switch happen. At that point, it's not his fault. It's not even that, oh, it's Luka, that he's a great player. Literally put any guard on Rudy Gobert. It's not like, oh, well, he's the defensive player of the year, but it's a mismatch, right? You're not defensive player of the year for guarding guards and forwards or for blocking three-point shots. You're doing it for in the paint, so it's not really fair. I don't care if it's Dikembe Mutombo. I don't care if it's, Bill Russell, or he was a bit more mobile at least, but you're not actually able to do that matchup. So it's irrelevant that it's Rudy Gobert. It's irrelevant that it's Luka. It's like you have a guard/forward. Obviously, Luka plays like a guard, regardless of his size and all that. The point is that, you have a mismatch. So, of course, you're going to attack the mismatch. It could be a different guard. It could be it doesn't have to be the defensive player of the year. That outcome is not that big of a deal because what do you expect a center to do, right? You're obviously going to dance on him. You're obviously going to do whatever you want. So I'm not going to be too impressed by that for the simple fact that, he did what he had to do, but the real fault is the mismatch. So it's not Rudy's fault. He should have just played up a little more on the three-point shot. That's the only thing, right? Just let him force him to go by you, because it's not that, you're going to stay in front of him, but you can at least stay attached to him. So he has no choice. He'll drive around you, and then he'll get a pass or get a mid-range or something. But then, again, you're up by 2. So the worst case is you're just still tied in that situation. So you have, so I don't actually blame him for that, because you have to think, again, the real problem is that it's a mismatch. And the second problem is that it's actually whether he's even out there in the first place, which I don't really question that all the time, but I guess in that situation, maybe it's a bad idea. But no, again, you put a center on a center who's known for blocking shots and who is big and a little bit slow, you put them on a guard/forward. Now, what do you expect to happen? So it's not his fault. You shouldn't have allowed that switch to occur if you're going to do single coverage. Even if you do allow it to occur, then you should be doubling up on him. So that defense is just bad. You could say it's a coaching issue. You could say it's a team defense issue, but I'm not going to actually blame him at all for that. And then the other point that people are talking about is the whole, being too hard on Boston. But I think it's fair because remember, they did just lose to an 8 seed last year. So they show a certain mental weakness where, it's a case of, Jaylen Brown's one of my favorite players. And if they win the title or whatever, any amount of success they're going to have, Jaylen Brown is always better than Jason Tatum. I've said that from, years past. So that take will age obviously very well now, right? He's going to be the clutch one. He's going to be the finisher. He's going to be the finals MVP, 100%. 100% Jaylen Brown will be the finals MVP if they win, but I'm not even predicting still that they're going to win. I still think actually Minnesota will win despite being down 0-2 to Boston. Or not to Boston, to fucking the Mavs, right? But the point is that you have a situation where people think you're being too hard on Boston, but I think it's fair because they lost to an 8 seed last year. They choked away, in the finals when they were up 2-1. So they've shown mental weakness. So until they prove something in the finals, until they win, I'm not going to be sold on them. But no, Jaylen Brown is better than Jason Tatum when it really matters, and overall, just period. Not even like, clutch moments and stuff like that. Just overall, he's going to be consistently better, honestly. And that's fine, again. But I don't like the coaching and the over falling in love with Tatum too much. And then the other point is, Porzingis is injured, but they can deal with that, or he'll come back, whatever. So, yeah, I would predict that. Well, what else are people saying? Like, all these kind of takes that people are getting clowned for, like, Tatum's overrated. He has 36, but he should have had 50. Okay, I don't agree with that, right? But he always puts up good numbers. I'm more just somebody who says you got to put them up in more meaningful games. So those are like the 4 takes or something, right? Like, he had 36, but he should have had 50. Or, they're winning, dominating opponents, but, they're the wrong opponents, right? It's not your fault, but I just want to keep it in context. So it stands to reason with the same prediction like with the Nuggets. Like, you haven't been battle-tested yet, so now you're going to lose because you'll lose in the finals because you're not ready for the kind of opponents you're going to face, whether it be the Mavs or whether it be the Wolves or whatever, right? So that point I would stand by, that they haven't really been tested. But again, that's not really their fault, but there is a certain complacency that is their fault from the past and the kind of the mental weakness they've shown. And so what are the other ones? So again, I don't agree with, you had 36, you should have had 50, that kind of mentality. I don't agree with necessarily that it's your fault that you don't have competition, but it's at least worth keeping in mind, and it informs your next prediction that you haven't been tested, so don't be too impressed by it, right? And then, Jaylen Brown is better. I agree with that one because Jaylen Brown actually is better, and I've always said that from many, 5 years back I've said that, so I've actually been pretty ahead of the curve on that one, right? He's just an actual better player, period, right? He's more skilled. Yes, he's had some bad moments too, along with, losing to the 8 seed and all that kind of stuff, like the Heat, but what was the other one? Like, it's competition. I just saw, this little list of all these kind of things that, again, it's not your fault who you go against. It's not your fault that, you didn't have 50 instead of 35, whatever, you should do even better. It's not your fault that Jaylen Brown's better than you, but that's a coaching and team approach thing that you should realize that. So there's only one thing that actually is relevant, and it is the simple case of, I got to see, actually, I'll check on my phone in a second when I stop. Of course, I do these while I'm driving. But no, it's not Rudy Gobert's fault, and the Wolves have no need to panic. They just have to get back to what they were doing against Denver. Anthony Edwards has had a couple bad games, and again, I'm not the one who's glazing him up the way people were. He's Michael Jordan, this and that. And I'm also not going to jump off the bandwagon now, or not that I'm even on a bandwagon, but don't be prisoner of the moment because you have a case in which you're looking at, like, he is a good player, he will rebound, he will have a couple of good games, but people overreact. Just because he played well against Denver doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden Michael Jordan, right? You don't have to make all these comparisons all the time. And so my friend had a funny comment, like, ESPN gives you a bonus for every time you compare somebody to Kobe or LeBron or Jordan or whatever. Like, you just do it over and over for everybody all the time. Like, it gets old, dude. Why? Just because they play the same position or whatever? Like, it's stupid. You know, Kawhi Leonard could have been compared to Jordan, at least in a fair way, because they have similar builds, their hands are both big, they can palm the ball, they have similar styles of play, you know, kind of living in the mid-range, right? They at least have very direct physical similarities that way. But no, you have this where Anthony Edwards will rebound, they will win that series against the Mavs, it will be tougher than originally intended. But yeah, people jump on and off bandwagons way too much, though. You know, Denver's down 0-2, oh, they're going to get swept, right? Like, I certainly wouldn't have said they would have gotten swept. In fact, I still said that they were going to win, but at least, you know, they lose in 7 games. And then the same thing here, oh, Minnesota's going to get swept. No, they're not going to get swept. Right, like, even if they lost, it's going to be in 6 or 7 games, but I'm predicting that they're actually going to win. And again, I would have originally said 6, but I'll at least say it's going to be 7 now because of how badly, you know, they've lost 2 in a row. Not that they've lost by a lot, but I mean, just losing 2 in a row at home to start is a little bit of a shock. So I can't imagine them winning in less than 7. But no, these are 2, in fact, quite frankly, I'm kind of wrong about that a little bit with the... Or I'm going to say that Kyrie Irving's streak will be broken. That I didn't even realize what I was just predicting. Kyrie Irving's streak will be broken. Why? Because as soon as you say that, oh, they're going to lose in 7 games, that means that he's losing 2 closeout games. One closeout game. That's the only problem with this kind of content that I don't like, is that there's a time pressure behind it. Like, at least when you're reviewing a movie or reacting to a show or something, yes, it would be better to sort of bait views, like, oh, this episode just came out, like The Mandalorian, some new season or something, right? And people would be more eager to watch that because it's just current, right? And, of course, show the actual video of the thing or something, you know, just copyright disregard, which I don't like to do that either. I just like to show the timestamp and stuff like that of what I'm watching. But the point is that, and I could also react to like a take, like a segment from like a show there like that, whether it be First Take or something like that, where I could actually watch through and do that. Right, in addition to just talking about these as random various subjects, the thing of the matter is that, but no, there's a pressure here. Like, I have to upload this before, right? Whatever. I guess, I mean, what I'm talking about would show you I couldn't clearly be faking it. But no, I'm from the future, and I already saw that Minnesota won in 7 games. So, right, I'm just pretending like I predicted it. But no, I would have to do it right away because there's a time pressure because this stuff is ongoing. So that's what I don't like about it. But what I do like about it is... Okay, let me just recap then all my other predictions. So, Minnesota will win 3 in a row, then they'll lose game 6, and then they'll win game 7. Then Boston will lose game 4, then they'll win game 5 against Indiana, then they'll go to the finals. And then for the final series, obviously Minnesota will win in actually just 6 games, because Boston will once again fold. So I think that we'll see this 2-0 pattern repeat, where Minnesota... No, I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving Boston enough credit. But no, I would say Minnesota wins the first 2 against Boston, then they lose 2, and then they win the final 2. So it'll be, you know, games 1 and 2 Minnesota, games 3 and 4 Boston, games 5 and 6 Minnesota, right? And so this is kind of how the sports career networks work too. It's like, if you make enough predictions, eventually you're going to get something right. Like, somebody predicted it perfectly, Jamal Crawford or somebody, that Luka's going to take a step back 3 or whatever on that possession, and he, you know, obviously was very right about that in game 2 there. So the point is that you hang around long enough in these industries and like, wow, you're right about 1 out of 1,000 things that you say, right? And you don't really get true accountable. It's like being a politician. You don't get accountable or blamed for, or it's like religion. It's like being God. You don't get blamed for what goes wrong or what you're wrong about, but you get credit for something good when it happens, right? Like, oh, look, God saved me from this such and such terrible event, but they also put you in that situation too then, or whatever. But just, you know, you can't have it both ways. Like, Like 9/11 for George Bush. Let's get heavy with it. Like, it's not his fault that 9/11 happened, but now we're going to have his highest approval rating ever after because, we're going to a war in Iraq under false flag pretenses. But even without that element, it's like you give him credit for, we're going to stand up for our country and fight back against whatever. But also, you're not going to blame him for actually allowing that to happen in the first place. Like, under your watch, this is one of the main responsibilities. You're supposed to protect the country from attacks like that from other countries or other, organizations and so forth. So the point is, in the less serious sense, like Stephen A. Smith, at what point do you lose credibility when you're wrong about so many things? You should at least be right, 50% of the time or more than 50%, even somebody who doesn't really know what they're saying. I think my record is actually pretty decent, right? Like, again, if I'm getting derailed by injuries, you can count that as me being wrong too, right? I don't even care, but I just think that's sort of unfair because, like, so let's say, okay, everybody's picking Boston to win, just the odds makers and stuff, right? And yeah, sports betting has ruined sports because people are so obsessed with that element or whatever, but the point is that people are on Boston's bandwagon. So Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both get injured, and then they lose. It's one thing, okay, Porzingis, but he's not like their one or two best player. So that still plays a factor, and you could use that as a defense, like, that's why they lost. But within reason, if I had picked, like, if Rudy Gobert goes down, right, I'm comparing those two, but if Rudy Gobert goes down, it doesn't mean you're not going to win, or even if Cat goes down, well, I mean, at least the best two you have to keep in mind, right, Cat and Anthony Edwards. So like that's the criteria. If Luka and Kyrie are healthy, the Mavs should win according to you, assuming that that's who you picked. If Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns are healthy, they should win, according to me, right? So if Rudy Gobert goes down, or even Jaden McDaniels, they got Luka, but we got Jaden McDaniels. If they go down, as long as the main two players are there, you should still be confident that you should win. Just it might be a little more difficult. And then Porzingis is fine, but if Brown and Tatum, either one of those, or if both of those are playing, then you should still be fine, right? So that element you should still feel, but I can understand that even that will play a role. But it's different when you lose like Giannis or Kawhi or somebody like that, who's like such a cornerstone to your franchise. Like, you need that, right? You can't, like, if Luka goes down, or even if just Tatum goes down, that's not really fair, right? Obviously, your pick is going to be wrong, but you were assuming that wasn't going to be the case, right? The way you're truly wrong is, okay, if Minnesota loses to Dallas, like right now, as it is, that's fine. I can accept that I'm wrong, but I don't think that'll happen. They won the first two. They were close. I'm surprised by it. I think somewhat it's bad coaching. Like, again, they're not going to score in the paint. Dallas should be scoring 0 points in the paint because how are they going to do it? Right now, they might be bombing away from three, but eventually they're going to start missing and struggling, right? They'll have a bad game. And so it's going to be a case where, all these recency bias clowns, like, Denver's going to get swept when they're down 0-2, or, now Minnesota's going to get swept, they're down 0-2. Like, it would stand to reason that you might lose the series. I can understand that, which Denver obviously ultimately did. But to say they're going to get swept is so moronic. Like, what is the likelihood that a team of these calibers, right, Minnesota or the Nuggets, who are the defending champion, is going to get swept? Like, that's completely moronic. That almost never happens. Like, I'm trying to think, when does a defending champion really get swept without injuries? Like the Lakers did in 2011 when they, not even when a defending champion just loses and doesn't repeat, or even loses before the finals. But you're saying they're not going to repeat, they're going to lose before the finals, but they're also going to get swept before the finals? Like, come on. So I'm still even surprised that they lost it all, but I'm not surprised that, or you know what I mean? Like, to say that they would get swept is one of these hot take moron kind of things, but you deserve to get clowned for it and lose credibility for it. So the same people who said, Denver's going to get swept, are the same people who are now going to say, Minnesota's going to get swept. Like, but those two takes are pretty much there. So Boston will lose in the finals, and so I think Minnesota will win the first two games. Boston will win games 3 and 4, and then Minnesota will close it out in games 5 and 6. And so therefore, I'm contradicting one thing that even I'm surprised by, where I'm saying that Minnesota will win the next 3 in a row. And, I'd be better off saying because Uncle Drew is undefeated, right, in closeout games. I'd be better off saying that Minnesota just wins 4 straight, but I'm not going to do that. I think Minnesota will win 3 straight, then they'll lose game 6, and then Kyrie, for the first time in his career, will fail to close out a team, and they'll actually lose in game 7, that's a hefty prediction to make. Bit of a hot take myself, but I think I wouldn't have had to predict that, you see. My original prediction was respecting that record, saying that, okay, Minnesota will win in 6, therefore there is no closeout game for the Mavs, so they're not missing the opportunity. But now they forced my hand because they've lost the first 2, Minnesota. Now I have no choice but to say it'll be 7, because it's very unlikely that they'll win like 4 in a row, right? So, you know, Luka and Kyrie get hot one game, of course they're going to win at least 1. But we saw the same movie happen with the Nuggets series where they win 3 in a row. You're just putting yourself in a, you know, where the team down 0-2 wins 3 in a row. It can happen. Or like even in the finals with the Suns and the Bucks, right, that was even one that I predicted pretty well at that point. I had said the Bucks were going to win that even when they're down 0-2. I'm pretty sure. I probably said they would have won in 7, right, not 6. But again, I'm not fazed by 0-2. You can definitely come back. So what happens? The Bucks win 4 straight. So there is something to that. I can't remember exactly what I said there, but I guess I wasn't sold on Chris Paul, who was way overrated, because Devin Booker almost doesn't get enough credit for that. You took a team where your second best player is supposedly Chris Paul, and like he still was playing decently, but you know what I mean? What does Patrick Beverley say? He's a cone. He's like a cone. But yeah, I got to figure out a better mic setup for this whole thing. A lot of people just use their phones to do it, but I got this recorder that's maybe not that good. Maybe I'll have to get a new one, but whatever. I've been enjoying these formats overall, so this was just a random one. But no, my predictions are locked in, so I think that ultimately, what is the trajectory? I said in the finals, 2, 2, and then 2. Right, so home team, or no, it wouldn't be home team. It'd be, that's kind of a weird prediction to make. I'll stick by it, but I think it's possible, you know, you go 1-1. But I somehow just think Boston's going to come out really overconfident and not battle-tested. So they'll lose the first 2, win the next 2, and then lose the final 2. And so for Dallas, I'm predicting they're going to lose the next 3 games, then win game 6, then lose game 7, and then Boston's going to lose the next game and then win in game 5. So all that much is perfectly fine. And again, the way that the complexion of the series is going to change is that they're going to start to struggle in the paint to score, and they're going to rely too much on jump shots and actually start to miss them a little bit. And so that's going to be a case where you're going to fall in love with the jump shot. Like, wow, look at Luka hitting that 3. And that moment will precipitate the downfall of the Mavs, because now it's like, okay, we're going to force you. You want to hit those fancy 3s, go ahead and do it. But we're not going to let you hit anything else in the paint. And we're not going to let anybody else score besides Luka and Kyrie. And so, you know, they're going to have to score 100 points between them and just hitting jump shots. And so they're going to stifle you on the inside. So that will harken the beginning of the end for the Mavs, that even though it's a good shot and you win the game, right, it represents that you're going to have to keep making these kind of tough shots. Not that one was really that tough, but that's where Luka and Kyrie will drive you crazy, though. You can play defense perfectly for 23 seconds, and they'll make some crazy shot clock cheese type moment, as Chris Smoove would say in NBA 2K. Like, you'll make some crazy thing that's not an easy shot, but for them it's easy. That's where Luka almost reminds me. He reminds me a lot of Larry Bird, obviously, because they're both slow and unathletic, and they can shoot, and they're kind of just, you know, very skilled to make up for that. But, you know, the way they shoot even is a little bit similar, and they're kind of like just sort of similar builds. Like they have a lot in common, right? Like my friend made that Magic Johnson joke, like in game 7, I think with Phoenix, where he's blowing out Phoenix in the first quarter. He says, Magic Johnson quoting, it's a fake quote, but he's saying, Magic Johnson says, Luka, I knew Larry Bird. I played against Larry Bird. Larry Bird was my friend. Luka, you're Larry Bird incarnate. Like basically the joke quote in some politician said that, like, I knew John Kennedy, he was my friend, and you're senator, you're no John Kennedy, right? Like that. So in other words, it's just reversing it and saying, Luka, you're basically Larry Bird. And so that's just what he reminds a lot of people of. But what he reminds me of in this moment of another Dallas Maverick, even though they're totally different styles of play, is Dirk Nowitzki. Like, Dirk would make those fadeaway one-legged shots. It's like Do you work on that move? Is that part of your routine? When have you shot that shot before? When? Like Patrick Ewing, I can't remember exactly the quote, but like Dirk Nowitzki's one-legged step-back shot, it's like, it's a difficult shot, but he chooses to take it, and he makes it enough to validate it. It's like, you can get that shot anytime, right? Anybody of that size could take that shot, but it's like, it's considered hard. So yes, if Luka wants to take a little step-back three or whatever, it's still a hard shot, but for him, I guess it's not. So it's just like, it's not a good shot, right? As Paul George would say, that's a bad shot, but it doesn't matter, because I guess, if you make enough of them, people start to believe where it's just different for you, but it doesn't mean still that it's a great quality shot. So at some point, those are going to bite you in the behind, but, that's where he almost reminds me of that. Like, a lot of the shots he takes are not really that high quality in theory, but yet he makes them, so if you're good enough to do that, and so be it. Like, it's two players who seem to make everything more difficult for themselves, right? Luka's slow, unathletic. Dirk also kind of is like that. Dirk was also kind of one-dimensional, not a great rebounder for his size, not a great defender, not a great scorer in other ways. Yes, he could score inside at times and things like that, but it's like he could do one thing really well, which is to score, and mostly just shoot jump shots. Mostly just shoot jump shots in the process. So here's why they got upset by an 8 seed like the Warriors, the We Believe Warriors, when Dirk was MVP. Why? Because when your best player is one-dimensional, not only a one-way player, not a great defender, not a great rebounder, not a great passer, nothing, right? Not going to get steals, not going to get blocks, not going to get assists, not going to get rebounds, not going to score in too many other ways, right? Yes, he could back you down, he could score in the paint, but relatively he's going to mostly be doing one thing and one thing only, which is he's going to hit jump shots. So if his jump shot is on, yes, you can win. If his jump shot is off, you can lose to an 8 seed with the MVP, because, you know what I mean, you shut down that one aspect of his game and he has no answer to it, really, right? So that's the problem, that as great as Dirk is as a player, and as much as he gets hyped up, he wouldn't be as high on my list. He'd be like, bottom 25 instead of, top 50, but closer to 50 than top 25, because he's just not, I don't want that. We're like, okay, our defensive strategy is let's shut down Dirk's jump shot. Then what happens? Oh, you lose to a 8 seed, or even when you win in 2011, I'm not taking away, he played great, but he could play great in other series and seasons, but they don't win. So it had a lot to do with, okay, maybe LeBron choking, but also it had to do with just the overall greatness of the three-point stretching that they had. Like, they had so many. They were bombing away threes like crazy, right? Jason Terry, Deshaun Stevenson, Sean Marion was hitting threes. Like, everybody's just hitting threes. So that team collectively is a lot better maybe than people realize, or not even really better than people realize, but just the style was different, right? Maybe it's like the Rockets from 94, the first time before they got Clyde Drexler, where it's like, you have Hakeem Olajuwon and nobody else on the roster is even an all-star, but yet they're bombing away threes. Like Mario Ellie was the second time, but whatever, whoever they had, I don't even remember the whole roster, but, you got Robert Horry hitting threes, you got Kenny Smith hitting threes. So, like, the point is, you have one big beast center in the middle who draws the attention, and then you have all these other shooters on the outside. I don't remember if Mario Ellie was on that first team, actually, but because he does the kiss of death, but that was the second year, right, with Clyde Drexler and stuff like that, where they're the 6 seed and they're kind of the underdog even. Never underestimate the heart of a champion, but you have that, which people did to Denver, which maybe overall turned out true, but it's like I'm stuck between two takes where, I had predicted that they wouldn't win the title because I thought they had too easy of a path last year, but I did predict at least they would win that series, even being down 0-2, right? So I was wrong about them winning that series, but I was right about them not winning the title, and the premise, I guess, still comes true that, you're in a position of, you had it too easy and you got too complacent, so you're a bit of a clown team. The Joker goes from a Joker to a clown, but it's not his fault, really. He played still very well. People shitting on him for the third MVP. Shea was actually my pick just because, it's a younger team. He's leading them to unexpected heights, things like that. Whereas with the Nuggets, you are the defending champion, so it's like the expectation, that's always what it is. Like, who is really causing their team to really overperform? And now you can blame Shea and all for losing to Dallas, but it's kind of like, they almost shouldn't have been as good as they were. right? So they overachieved, and so it's just kind of hard to say. Yeah, like one of those 94 Rockets teams or whatever, 75 Warriors team or Rick Barry. Like, you have one star. Nobody else is even an all-star. You have one superstar. And yet you somehow, in the case of the Rockets and the case of the Mavericks, like, you have everybody bombing away from three, so you have a nice balance. It's rare that teams like that win, yes, but, you know, it's not that, oh, Dirk all of a sudden played so great, because he might play great in other series, but yeah, that's my point, is just that he's basically one-dimensional. But those are two players who make everything look a lot more difficult than what it is, Luka and Dirk, so that's why I'm not a fan of players like that at the highest level, because I would rather have Shaq, right? Shaq is better than Dirk and Luka, not just because he's just better, period, like 3 finals MVPs and this and that, but even his style of play is like, even like Giannis. I would take Giannis over Luka or Dirk any day, because yes, people try to discredit him like, oh, it takes less skill. Like James Harden said that. You know, I wish I was big and strong like you. But again, it's an athletic sport, so if you don't want that to be a factor, go play chess or something. Go do something else, because it's an inherent part of sports that athletic advantages are going to be a part. Like if somebody's 10 feet tall, you know going into a sport that could be a factor. Or somebody's, big and strong, that plays a role, right? And to be in Giannis's defense, he didn't come in that strong. He came in and he was kind of skinny, actually, right? And so he put on weight, put on muscle. So part of that is to his own credit, to kind of build up his body and to use it so effectively. But the point is that I want that. I would take Giannis over most of these guys. Why? Because you can rely on Giannis being big and strong and tall every night. You might not be able to rely on Luka making these tough step-back shots and all these kind of contested shots every single night, right? You can't always rely on that. Some nights you're going to struggle. It's just so difficult what you're doing, right? That I'd rather have, Shaq's just going to dunk on you rather than Dirk hitting a step-back, one-legged fadeaway shot, right? What would I rather put my faith in and trust in for you to be able to do in a day-in, day-out basis, right? So I'm talking more about the style of play rather than the player, right? So Steph Curry hitting threes, as much as I love and respect him, I would rather have somebody with a more surefire style of play than that, whether it be a center or something. Again, assuming that they're both equally great and all-time great. So, like, would I take Giannis over Steph Curry all-time? Maybe not, but maybe, because, he's a two-way player, and he's going to win, at least one more championship before he retires. But it's hard to measure Steph's impact because he's been so monumental. But it's kind of like, again, he can have those bad games, like in the finals, like in 2016, and he can start to, struggle with his jump shot, and then, not that he doesn't have things to fall back on, he can score inside, he can pass, but it's just a case where he's not, it's a tough style of play, right? You're putting yourself in a position where you're hitting all these tough threes. Yes, he can do it. Yes, he's done it consistently. Yes, he's done it through the playoffs, but it still makes me uncomfortable, like, to rely on that. There has to be something, if I had a choice of a style of play, right, I would still go for the easier one. And I don't even use that really to discredit people, because it's kind of like, you're big and strong, but even if that's the reason why you're good, well, first of all, there's plenty of big and strong players who are not that great, right? The dunk contest is a good indication of that. Like, look how athletic Aaron Gordon is, or somebody like that. It doesn't mean you're automatically going to be that great. Like, you're not going to be a superstar, but you're still athletic or whatever. Or again, Manu Bol wasn't an all-time great player, or who's the other one? George Marasan, right? These guys had huge height advantages, but it doesn't mean you're automatically going to be great. And so, you know what I mean? Like, you can't play a physical athletic sport and then complain like, oh, physical advantages are relevant. Like, that going in, and that's part of it, and that's that's an asset. It's nothing to be ashamed about.